tonsure. So tonsure means the shaving of the head. So this paper seeks to analyze the real patriarchal intention behind the enforcement of such practices. The text I have taken for study is Phaniyamma, a Kannada novel written by M.K. Indira. So moving on to paper. At the heart of the patriarchy lies the oppression of women, and the patriarchal forms of oppression manifest themselves in different ways. In India, one such gendered identity which articulates the prolonged histories of oppression and the periods of coexistence is the upper caste Hindu widow. Using various socio-political mechanisms, patriarchy makes possible the oppression of widows. Widowhood in India among the upper caste is a socially constructed phenomenon of patriarchy. Many writers have tried to voice against the plight of widowhood and the dehumanization practiced on the hapless young Hindu widows. Among them, the Kannada writer M.K. Indira's Phaniyamma depicts a very authentic picture of the life of an upper caste Brahmin widow and the trauma of widowhood. In this paper, I intend to explore the various constraints imposed upon the figure of the upper caste Hindu widow, more pertinently on the upper caste Brahmin widow, to highlight one of the darker aspects of Hinduism, to be more precise, the ritual of tonsure. My attempt is to examine the implications associated with it and the real intention behind it against the backdrop of the prolonged history of oppression practicing or existing in the Brahminical patriarchy. So, Brahminical patriarchy is the model of patriarchy outlined in the Brahminical prescriptive text to be enforced by the coercive power of the king or to those who act on behalf of the king. So, this set of norms has shaped the ideology of the upper caste in particular. So, the story of Phaniyamma. Phaniyamma unfolds the life of a child widow. Phaniyamma was born in a Brahmin household. She was born in 1840. She was the daughter of Thammayya and Sannamma. The house in which Thammayya was the runner in the postal department. He was a postman. So, the house in which she lived was traditionally known as Anjumane, or the postal house. It was a big title in the days of British. So, Phaniyamma was married at the age of 9 to Nanjunda, who was 15 years old. Within 2 months, the boy died due to snake bite, and the girl was widowed. So, later, she led the life of an austere Hindu widow till the end of her life, the long existence of 112 years. So, Phaniyamma unfolds the life of a child widow, was born in 1840 in a Brahmin household in Karnataka. Phaniyamma, which is both fiction and reality, is based on the life of M.K. Indira's great aunt, who was widowed at a tender age. Religion, especially Hindu religion, definitely had a main role to play in the lot of a widow. At the ideological level, religion and caste controls the lives of people through its religious ethics and codes of conduct. As Uma Chakravarti states in her article, whatever happened to the Vedic Dasi, that, I quote, throughout the 19th century, the most problematic category of women were widows, and reformers were attempting to resolve the problem of what to do with the widow, especially since a large proportion of upper caste women were widowed, often as a consequence of early marriage. Unquote. Child marriage was allowed among all castes during the 19th century. It was considered as a religious and social obligation among the higher caste. Otherwise, the parents of the unmarried girl will have to face the wrath of society. Through Phaniyamma, Indira articulates different forms of social and political marginalization and aggressive practices based on tradition. In those days, the concept of Madi was cherished and considered as sacred and pure. Madi means ritually pure. So Madi women means widows. To become Madi is a kind of life where a widow has to observe certain conducts Like she should wear madi clothes, that means white clothes, after every day after bathing, and she should pray before God and in front of Tulasi to recite Gita and Ramayana. Then she should have to work in the kitchen till midnight. And after becoming Madi, she would remain indoors for 1 year. And not only that, Madi women eat one meal a day and fast at night. They have also some taboos of touching. If anything polluted had touched by a Madi woman before eating anything, she would have to bathe again and wear Madi clothes. So, along with Madi, in those days the concept of Madi was cherished and considered as sacred and pure. Along with Madi went the upholding of tradition and ritual, and above all the attitude of frogs in a well. So, in those days, tradition had become corrupt, and people did not have the courage to go against it. So, while emphasizing people's adherence to traditions, the significance of the Madi beliefs, and above all, the blind acceptance of the superstitions passed on to them over the generations, the novel discloses the deeply embedded material and ideological structures of patriarchy that have been used to govern the lives of widows. Phaniyamma demonstrates the oppressive patriarchal formulations in the Brahminical conceptualizations of widowhood, like child marriage and the enforced widowhood through various customs and rituals. Phaniyamma is married to Najunda at the age of 9, and the boy dies due to snake bite, resulting in her widowhood 2 months after her marriage, even before she attained maturity. 10 days, of course, her masks of marriage would remain. In those days, decisions regarding social and religious matters were taken by the Swami in the temple at Sringeri. This temple was one of the 5 temples established by Adi Shankaracharya. So Phaniyamma's grandfather, the Patriarch of Anjumane, arranged for a consultation with the Swami at Sringeri. The instructions were unequivocal. I quote, "Since the girl is still a child, remove the signs of marriage on the 11th day and have her wear a white sari. Don't touch her hair. She shouldn't show her face to anyone until she menstruates, nor can she perform any Madi task. The 4th day after she menstruates, her hair must be shaved off, and she must be made to take up Madi for the rest of her life. If these instructions are in followed to the letter, the entire household will be excommunicated." So excommunication was the most dreaded and frequent punishment then. As a gateway to the institution of widowhood, certain customs and rituals have been practiced in Hindu religion to differentiate a woman from the image of a Sumangali, an auspicious or married woman, to that of a penniless widow. As Uma Chakravarti states in her article, Ideological and Material Structure of Widowhood, that a widow has to give up all forms of adornment as well as those customs or symbols that are associated with the marriage of a woman. She must avoid the use of kunguma, the red mark on the forehead, the sindura. It symbolizes the sexually active or sexually potent female. The sindura applied in the parting of the hair, and the using of haldi. Haldi means turmeric. These items are associated with sexuality and reproduction. Other widely prevalent customs are the breaking of the bangles and the breaking of the Mangal Sutra, the sign of a married woman in many parts of India. In Phaniyamma's life, a similar situation undergoes. I quote, "On the 11th day, the old men and women of the village mercilessly broke the bangles of the 9-year-old girl. They wiped off her turmeric and kungum and tore off her Mangal Sutra. This is a symbolic action, symbolic of the severance of her connections with the world and of her withdrawal into asceticism. Being a child, she doesn't understand the patriarchal ideologies behind these actions on her, but she cried a little because they had destroyed the newly bought bangles from the fair. Besides, she is unaware of the implications of being a widow and newly fabricated framework of widowhood. Apart from the above-mentioned markers of widowhood, the 2 other important symbols are also used to indicate the status of widowhood, that are the white, ochre and maroon coarse sari and the tonsured head among the higher caste Hindus in southern and western India. Now, it is significant to look at what is the ritual of tonsure conveys in Hindu religion. Apart from the various denotations associated with it as religious devotion and humility in many religions like in Christianity, Buddhism and Islam, etc., tonsure has multiple implications in Hindu culture. Like a Hindu boy's hair is tonsured at the time of Ubadayana, a sacred thread ceremony, or similarly, a closely shaved head indicates the state of celibacy and a partly shaved head implies the state of being an outcast or socially ostracized by the community as a retribution for his or her transgression. Adopting the most visible and excruciating ritual of tonsure as a weapon, Brahminical patriarchy endorses widows' sexual and social death. As a custom, it was compulsory for the Hindu Brahmin widow and was symbolic of her withdrawal into celibacy and asceticism. So here, a wife has no other existence except her husband. So widow has no existence. So she is physically alive but socially dead. So as a custom, it was compulsory for the Hindu Brahmin widow and was symbolic of her withdrawal into celibacy and asceticism. From about 1200 AD, it was existed as a common custom till the end of the 19th century. At first, it was confined only to the Brahmana class. Later, it was extended to the rest of the society. Chakravarti envisages in her article that in order to control the innate promiscuity of women, the Hindu Brahminic patriarchy is stringently monitoring the sexuality of women, especially widows, through patriarchal gaze. She also asserts that the enforced tonsure is a double-edged weapon of patriarchy to enforce widowhood and thereby ascribing its authority over widow's body and on her sexuality. So, tonsure marks a cessation of her sexual existence. So, in a similar vein, McKinnon, a feminist theorist, suggests that sexuality itself is a power structure where male sexuality is learned and experienced as domination and female sexuality is learned and experienced as submission, a dichotomy of power and powerlessness. Stating the attitude of the Brahminical patriarchy towards widows, Indira explains how the family of Phaniyamma welcomed the news of her menstruation after 4 years of her widowed life. I quote, "All the women of the village came to visit and clicked their tongues in sympathy. No celebration, no arati, no sesame and jaggery sweets," wept Phaniyamma's mother. On the 4th day, the last auspicious rite of her life awaited Phaniyamma. The women of the household surrounded the barber who sat under the jackfruit tree in the yard, making sure he cut off the girl's hair and shaved her head absolutely smooth. Unquote. In ancient India, the pre-pubertal marriages were existed among some Orthodox Hindus as a practice to save their family from the prospective shame that an unmarried daughter might bring to their family. And after this marriage, the girl lives in her native family and does not go to her husband's family to live with him until she attains puberty. Here, Phaniyamma is a victim of pre-pubertal marriage and became a widow even before she comes of age. Phaniyamma also explores the body of the widow that has been considered as a site to conduct all forms of atrocities by the deeply entrenched system of Brahminical patriarchy. However, using various mechanisms for repression and sublimation of female sexual impulses, patriarchy exposes its hegemony over females. Here, the ritual of tonsure can be seen as an attempt to annihilate and deprive both the social and psychological self of a widow. Widows have been treated as mere subjects in the hands of the cruel system. Using its power, the power-packed discourse of patriarchy makes the impassible figures like that of Phaniyamma. For instance, after the last auspicious rite of tonsure, I quote, "Now Phaniyamma bent her head like a lamb and wept. Nearly 14 now, she had grown to full stature in the darkened room. She had blossomed into youth. No fast and pujas and ceremonies for her now, unlike the other girls. She realized that until she died, she would have to eat one meal a day and live with a shaven head. But what could she do? This happened to every woman whose husband died. No one had wronged her. If there was any mistake, they would be excommunicated by the temple at Sringeri. Unquote. Here, Phaniyamma exemplifies the paradigm of an ascetic widowhood by accepting meekly the general conduct set by the patriarchy to be followed by widows after the death of their husbands. Nevertheless, inscribing the questions raised by the women's movement of the 70s and the radical conceptualizations provided by it, Indira makes her heroine voice against the dehumanizing attitude of patriarchy towards widows and thereby challenges the past ideologies of widowhood. For instance, when a strong, beautiful, and spirited woman of 16 named Dakshayani refused to become Maadi on the 10th day, her in-laws forced and coerced her to become Maadi, pointing out Phaniyamma's life as a model for her to accept Maadi. Here Phaniyamma questions the core of tradition after so many years of mute suffering. Phaniyamma vilifies the hypocrisy of these men and exhorts the need to change. She questions, I quote, "Why do you bring up the practices of my time? I don't even remember seeing my husband's face. Sometimes I feel as though I were born this way. Times have changed so much. This is a girl who should eat well and live well. Can she bear it if you make her take on Maadi at this age?" Unquote. Here Phaniyamma's voice echoes the repressed multiple voices of the oppressed widows of the past. She speaks against tonsure, which is inhuman and the most reprehensible act of Brahmins, and her voice heralds the voice of freedom they wish for after long years of passive resistance to the prescriptive codes of the Brahminical patriarchy. She remarks, I quote, "Our times were different. Everything has changed now. Those who lived in the city and are old enough to have grandchildren don't even feel the need to shave their heads. So what if a woman has hair on her head? Does all the impurity rest there? What punishment do you want for a child who has just begun to open her eyes? I am deeply grieved by this. That's all." Unquote. It can be seen that Hindu patriarchy is forcing the widow, irrespective of her age, to accept Maadi, which is a covert form of violence. Jalna Helmer, a feminist theorist, illustrates that violence must include not only the use of force, but also its threat. Therefore, violence as the use of force or the threat of force serves to compel or constrain women to behave or not to behave in given ways. Both constitute violence. Through Phaniyamma, Indira strikes at the hypocrisy of the patriarchal community, and at the same time she makes her heroine to define the Brahminical codes and pollution taboos. Hair has crucial symbolic significance in Hindu mythology. In the symbolic system of Brahmanism, the tuft means sexual restraint, the matted hair means total detachment from sexual passions, and the shaven head means celibacy. So, as Chakravarti states, the notion that sin and pollution both sit in the hair is a ubiquitously held belief among Hindus, and that is why the funeral rituals require the shaving of the head on the last day to ensure the removal of the pollution. As Uma Chakravarti has suggested, Obeskar explained that the primary psychogenetic meaning of the shaven head is castration, its cultural meaning is chastity, and its extended interpersonal meaning is renunciation. These three meanings are contained within the act of tonsure for widows, and the most important level of meaning is that of castration. While Phaniyamma was grieving over the condition of widows, Dakshayani, another widow, ran to Anjiyate, Phaniyamma, for help, but nothing could save her from this situation. Dakshayani's wailing reiterates this oppressive state. I quote, "Ate, I won't shave my hair off. I can't live like you. Please help me. Don't let them do this to me." Unquote. On the 9th day, she removed her Mangal Sutra, wiped off her Ashina and Kungum, and waited in a dark room. In order to make her come round to the patriarchal point of view, 20 old Maadi women come from the town to persuade her, speaking about heaven and hell, sin, punya, reincarnation, etc. Finding no way to escape from the patriarchal fort, Dakshayani yelled, "Tomorrow morning I am going to have my head shaved. You can all come to an early for me and get your coconuts and betel leaves. Are you satisfied now?" Finally, without showing any protest, Dakshayani submits herself to the most humiliating custom of patriarchy. This is what happens to all the hapless widows. Chakravarti asserts that the rites and customs associated with widowhood are performed with a degree of violence, which adds to the humiliation the widow must undergo for the rest of her life. The enforced tonsure is a deliberate attempt by the patriarchy to create an ascetic atmosphere around her. Such forced attempts can be viewed as violence, which is very much inherent in that action, but it is neatly blanketed with the soft wool of asceticism. Indeed, patriarchy intends to hide the sexuality of widows, using tonsure as an instrument, and thereby they try to legitimize an inhuman practice in the name of custom, tradition, and religion. So I conclude. So tonsure can be viewed as a disguised form of violence practiced by Hindu religion over many centuries. This Phaniyamma explores the historical continuum of oppressions that has been imposed on upper caste women from girlhood through wifehood, culminating in the inevitable oppression through the institution of widowhood.